They were wrong about skipping meals, slowing down metabolism and fat loss. They were wrong about skipping meals impacting insulin resistance negatively. They were wrong about skipping meals shrinking muscle tissue. At 30 hours of fasting with no food, your body isn't shutting down. In reality, it's turning up a bunch of processes that could make your life better. We're going to go step by step. I'm going to break this down into 5 different phases. That way we can go through fasting hour by hour, and we can talk about what you can do in these different phases to even accelerate the benefits in that respective phase. Things like activating fat burning, things like rebooting the gut, things like growing the brain quite literally. So let's jump into this first stage. This first stage I call emptying the sink, because I think of fasting a lot like this. You have a sink and it's full of food, and you have to drain that sink of the food with the garbage disposal before you actually get to the good stuff. So this first phase is really about just burning through the food that's in your system already. It's going to take a while for the energy from the last meal that you consumed to break down and be out of your system so you can start tapping into your stored fuel. For quite a while, you're still burning glucose and fatty acids from the meal that you just consumed. So your body breaks that down and insulin is elevated for a little while. And to a certain degree, that impedes fat loss because insulin does stand in the way of fat loss from occurring, especially if it's constantly elevated. During this first phase, like the first 12 hours or so, this is the period where you might feel a little bit more hungry. That's totally normal because your body is sending signals that you're running out of food. But this is also the ideal time to do a little bit of higher intensity cardio. I know it sounds a little bit wild, but the goal here is to burn through your fuel as fast as you can so your body starts sending signals to utilize your stored fuel better. So all the carbohydrates you consume for the last meal, your body is burning through them. It's digesting them, but then you have available glucose. So if you want to go lift some weights or run some sprints, now would be the time to get you burning through that faster. This is what we would consider to be the gateway to fat loss. This is when it starts to happen. And if people are going to quit, it's going to be at this time because it's a little bit more difficult. Your body is going through what is called substrate switching. Okay, you're going from using glucose, using the fuel that you just consumed, into now having to tap into something that your body maybe hasn't tapped into before. So again, we go back to that sink. You have to drain the sink first. It's got to go all the way down. And then once it's down, then you're able to start tapping into all the other things in your body. Let's move into the second phase. This is hours 12 through 16. Now, this is a really pivotal phase because what happens in this phase is you're actually starting to decrease insulin levels. You're starting to really creep into that fat burning state a lot more. So the insulin that was elevated from your previous meal has now gone down, and you're probably at a pretty low baseline insulin level, which means that you're now passing through the gateway into fat burning land. What happens at this point metabolically is there is a sensor in your body called AMPK. AMPK's job is to sense whether you have enough energy on hand or if you need to start tapping into stored fuel. It's an energy sensor. So anytime you exercise or you're going through periodic fasts, AMPK increases to tell the body, hey, we need to start pulling from other sources because there's not enough fuel on hand. So at this stage, stage 2 of the fast, it's the perfect AMPK switching state. Your body is officially in the switching gears phase. This is where you might feel a little bit tired, a little bit foggy, but you will start to notice that hunger is subsiding. Right around 14 hours, you're like, wait a minute, I could go for a longer period of time because it's your body's literal job to activate AMPK to make it so that you don't start bonking when you run out of fuel. How would we have ever survived as a species if we couldn't flip that switch and start using our own stored fuel? So this is a very pivotal phase. And one of the ways that you can accelerate through this phase and feel a lot better is light walking. So this 14-hour-ish phase, light cardio is your friend. Zone 1, low zone 2. Why? Because it encourages fat oxidation and it helps accelerate this process. If you try to do high intensity work right now, it would still work, but it wouldn't be as effective as, say, just going for a gentle walk. At about 14 to 16 hours, your digestion is probably done. You're probably through digesting that previous meal, unless you have something slowing things down. So the reality is, now the energy is diverted a little bit more towards repair. It's diverted a little bit more towards actually giving you brain energy. Think about from a survival perspective. You start going longer periods without food. For a human, what part of the body makes the most sense to have a lot of energy? Probably the brain, so that we can go ahead and find food, right? Because we have a large prefrontal cortex and we have the largest brains, right? So we're able to actually use our brains. So when we are starving or hungry, we get more brain energy. The next phase is phase 3. And this is the Goldilocks period. This is the hours of about 16 hours through about 24 hours. Now, the literature shows, the scientific literature shows that around 16 hours is when you start to go into a little bit more gluconeogenesis. Now, this is where a lot of experts for so many years really were wrong, or they flat out lied, quite frankly, telling us that when gluconeogenesis occurs, you're breaking down muscle. People that really are opposed to fasting love to say that because they say you'll shrink muscle tissue, when in reality, most of the evidence suggests that you don't start wasting muscle until you're fasting for longer than like 36 hours. As long as you're getting enough calories otherwise, it's gonna be okay. But I digressed. Point is, at around 16 hours, what happens is your body starts breaking down components of fat into glucose. Sounds crazy, right? I thought we got rid of all the glucose in our system. Well, when you are fasting, you're going without food for a long period of time. Your body uses glucose, but it makes it from other things. That's what's wild. We don't need to consume carbohydrates or glucose in order to create glucose. So our body does two things. Gluconeogenesis, it will take it from either the muscle and turn into glucose, or it will take it from fat. But the body strongly prefers to take it from fat than it does muscle, because generally speaking, muscle is important and metabolically critical. So the body doesn't just waste away and break down muscle to give you glucose. No, it turns part of the fat cell, the triglyceride, the glycerol, into an actual sugar molecule. So that's why all of a sudden your blood sugar levels are stable. Why are they stable? Because your body knows exactly the amount of sugar you need to maintain a stable blood sugar level. We cognitively do not. We think we do. So we have M&Ms or we have Skittles or we try to regulate our glucose, but my goodness, our bodies know how to regulate it. We think we do, but we're also tempted by moods and we're tempted by cravings and just general temptation. So let's let our body do the work and create glucose the way that it thinks it should. Now, during this phase, you might start to feel thirsty. This is normal because your insulin levels have now been low for a while, and that's going to trigger excess water to be excreted, or lots of water to be excreted, because when you have low insulin, your kidneys expel extra water. So this is the good time to maybe start adding in a little bit of salt or a little bit of electrolytes. And if you feel foggy or tired at this phase, it's much more likely to be an electrolyte issue than a metabolic issue. Around 16 to 20 hours is where we start to see in the literature that autophagy starts to ramp up. Autophagy increases when we fast, it increases in a caloric deficit, it increases when we exercise, and it increases through sauna and all kinds of other hormetic stressors. Autophagy is your body's scavenging system to ultimately consolidate. Think of it as a consolidation system. Okay, we have all kinds of fuel abundance in different cells and different things, but we're in a time of stress. Let's consolidate and let's trim the fat to make the most effective ones even stronger. At my home, we call that feed the stallion, starve the pony. Let's get the strong ones stronger. Let's let the weak ones, let's feed them to the stallions. Okay, that's a little extreme, but still. This autophagy, and specifically something called mitophagy, is really important. So a lot of times people will just flat out be wrong, and they'll say that autophagy is not something that's really cool with fasting because you can get it anywhere else. Guys, you can get autophagy from fasting and from exercise, and you could stack them together. They're not mutually exclusive. So that's amazing. So fasting is good for autophagy, but it's also really good for mitophagy, which is a specific cellular recycling that happens at a mitochondrial level. This is really cool because mitochondria have their own DNA. Did you know that? Mitochondria have their own DNA separate and apart from our regular human DNA. So that means that they replicate, they do their thing, they go through their different fusion and fission, and their own mitochondria program what they should do. It's probably part of an ancient bacterial component within our body, why they have their own DNA, which is fascinating. The point is that when we are metabolically unhealthy, so is our DNA and our mitochondria. So when we do things like fast and we actually improve the efficiency and the strength of our mitochondria, their DNA is going to replicate better mitochondria. So mitophagy is where we get rid of the cruddy mitochondria and we influence better mitochondria. And that is like compound interest, because once you have good mitochondria, then you have new good mitochondrial DNA that creates more and more and more, and it compounds with good mitochondria, making you potentially less insulin resistant, better fat burners, better mental energy, better brain function. There's a little bit of a shortcut that you can add from mitophagy that's come out in the research recently. Mitophagy is something that responds really well with something called urolithin A. I put a link down below for a cool company that is really interesting if you're watching this video, because they are literally creating a compound that creates more mitophagy. And this is real. It's called urolithin A. It's extracted from pomegranates in a concentrated form, and they have a patented form of it. So the company is called Timeline Longevity. I popped a link down below. That's a 10% off discount link if you want to give them a shot. Really effective stuff. It goes hand in hand with fasting and the kind of things you're trying to accomplish with fasting. So make no mistake, I'm all about doing things without supplements if you can, for sure. But when we're looking at metabolic and mitochondrial health, this stuff is epic, and it's paving the way with a lot of really cool longevity research. That link is in the top line of the description underneath this video. This is also the period of time around 20 hours when gut repair starts to kick in. So gut repair, meaning stem cells and other repair mechanisms within your body, actually accelerate a little bit more in the gut. This isn't mutually exclusive with fasting, okay? If you go longer periods of time without food, that's when the gut repairs, period. That's when you're supposed to give the gut a break. In today's world, today's cultures, we just constantly eat, constantly eat, constantly eat. The bottom line is that our gut needs a break. Every time we eat, we're not giving it a chance to repair. So gut stem cells are some of the first stem cells to actually reintroduce in our body. Now, you have like muscle stem cells, like satellite cells that will, help out when we break down muscle or workout. But when does the muscle actually repair? After a workout, when you're not working out. When does the gut actually repair? And when do the stem cells come in? When you're not actually eating. So even at smaller periods of time without eating, you might have an increase in stem cells, but there seems to be quite a proliferation of gut stem cells around the 20-hour mark. So this is when the gut repair is really happening. Quite frankly, this 20-hour period is a little bit of a weird metabolic gray area. And it's actually where you're burning the most physical fat, okay? And the reason that you're burning the most fat in this stage is because you're a little bit inefficient at it. Your body is saying, well, wait a minute. It's like dumping all the cards into fat burning because you've gone without food. It's a little freaked out. So it hits the gas pedal all the way and says, well, give me all this fat, give me all this fat. That's why people get so much energy around 20 hours, because all of a sudden you're flooded with additional fuel, right? So your body's relative inefficiency at breaking down fat and turning it into ketones at this point in time is actually your friend. So the 16 to 20 hour mark, all the way up to the 24-hour mark, that is the sweet spot for fat burning. So if you want to exercise, you want to walk, you want to sit in a sauna, it's your best time. Around 24 hours, we get into phase 4. This is the ketosis phase. And this is where you start to feel really, really good. Okay, you have almost no hunger because ketones blunt hunger. You feel really good because ketones blunt the NLRP3 inflammasome, and they blunt what's called nuclear factor kappa B. So it actually squelches inflammation at a core master level. So you feel, oh, my joints don't hurt. I feel good. I feel loose. You might not have like robust muscular strength. You might lose a little bit there, but it's well worth it with how mentally clear you feel and how cognitively switched on you are. Some people start to feel a little bit tired now, but that's simply because you're transitioning from using what are called fatty acids for fuel into ketones. So there's a little transition period here. Some people can have a little keto flu type feelings, and this is normal, but it's very short-lived as long as you don't cave and eat something. One of the best things about this, and I just had Dr. Matt Bernstein, and he's a leading psychiatrist in the world of metabolic and like ketones effect on the brain. So there is a major effect of ketones at this state of a fast to switch your brain from an excitatory glutamate tilted scale to what is called a GABAergic, gamma aminobutyric acid, GABA. Maybe you've heard of a GABA supplement before, but GABA is what is called an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it is what allows your brain to feel calm. The old saying, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. A calm brain is a fast brain. An anxious brain is definitely not a productive brain. It's like all over the place. So you want that GABAergic tone. So ketones actually help influence less glutamate and more GABA. So the brain is eerily calm. You're without food, yet you're calm, cool, and collected. Now, you also get a nice huge surge in BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is secreted by muscles, secreted by all kinds of different places, but it goes into your brain and it improves neuroplasticity. So it's making it so your brain is actually feeling clearer, and you can take on new tasks, and you have different outlooks, and you have all this clarity that you don't otherwise have. It's a really tremendous feeling. And finally, we get into that 30-hour range, that 24 to 30 hours, maybe even up to 36. There's a tipping point after 36 hours. After 36 hours, you do not get the same fat loss benefits. It starts to slow down, and after 36 hours, some of the muscle sparing effects go away. Because after 36 hours, your body learns that it doesn't need to produce as many ketones, it finds a groove, and then you start getting into those stages where you do run some risk of muscle wasting. But as long as you're, quite frankly, lifting, working out, moving around, it's a very minimal risk unless you're doing prolonged fasts all the time. You pretty much have very little glycogen at this point. So sometimes people get thrown off where they think their muscles are shrinking, but you're really just losing intracellular water. Remember that for every 1 gram of carbohydrate in your muscle, you hold about 3.7 grams of water. So when you lose that glycogen, your muscles look like they're shrinking, but you're just dropping water. So people freak out that they lost a bunch of muscle. No, you just lost intracellular water, and that's totally fine. As a matter of fact, the glycogen will start to replete as you create carbohydrates from other sources like fat. So you're going to end up ultimately being able to refill that muscle glycogen, even if you were to, let's say, do a low carb diet or stay fasting for a little while. So even though at 30 hours, fat loss slightly slows down, this is where the metabolic benefits with things like insulin resistance really kick in, because now you have gone approximately 20 hours with really low insulin levels. Okay, the evidence is showing that the longer you can keep insulin levels low, the better your body is at sort of resensitizing. So that means when you do eat carbohydrates again, your body will likely have a high degree of insulin sensitivity, less insulin resistance. So this is the metabolic sweet spot. Even if fat loss wasn't at its peak like it was 10 hours ago, you're at a spot now where your body is really doing a great job of repairing some of these metabolic functions. It's learning that it can use fats. It learns that it can use ketones. So now you have all these different ways that the mitochondria could process energy and not be bottlenecked by the inability to use glucose because of metabolic dysfunction. It's something so many of us face. 94% of the population of the US has a degree of metabolic dysfunction, which means they don't use glucose well. So if we can teach the cells how to use a different fuel, well, we can get life back again. Around 30 hours, you are in a nice muscle sparing spot. Ketones are high enough that you're not going to break down muscle. But one of the most important things to do is still lift weights at this point in time. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. Remember, metabolically and from a survival perspective, if you put pressure and the tension on the muscle, it's going to deem it as metabolically relevant and it's going to keep it. So in 30 hours, you've lowered insulin, you've increased fat loss, you've probably improved the visceral fat levels, you've had cellular cleanup, you've rebooted the gut, you've increased your brain health, you've increased autophagy and mitophagy and improved possibly even your mitochondrial DNA in just 30 hours. How long would that take you to do if you were just doing traditional caloric restriction? Not to say that caloric restriction isn't good, but you just crammed all these benefits into 30 hours. Now, I have another video that talks about a type of fasting that you can do 2 to 3 times per week that only takes a few hours. It's called a metabolic microfast, and it's great maintenance in between these longer fasts. So check that one out. And as always, I'll see you tomorrow.